For a while, a lot of us have been wondering why on earth did Isshin Kurosaki struggle so much against the Hollow White. During the flashback arc Everything But the Rain, we had seen a captain level Shinigami appear to barely hold his own against what Aizen had referred to as a mere prototype Hollow. Isshin's power had stood in stark contrast to what we had witnessed when he had effortlessly cut in half the Arrancar Grand Fisher with a single slash, or when he was going toe to toe with the transcendent Aizen during the fake Karakura Town arc. It's really hard to ignore these inconsistencies, as here we have a man who could flick Aizen through multiple buildings with casual finger movements, but yet 20 years earlier he appeared genuinely threatened by an experimental Hollow. Over the years, fans have come up with several theories. Perhaps Isshin had grown stronger over time. Maybe White was secretly captain level despite being referred to as a prototype, or possibly Kubo had simply written himself into a corner with some inconsistent power scaling. White had landed some meaningful hits, and Isshin's defensive positioning suggested that he was in a genuinely dangerous situation. And even after releasing his Shikai, he appeared to be on even footing with White, and this is until Aizen's intervention. These inconsistencies surrounding the power level of Isshin had troubled a lot of fans who love dissecting Bleach's power dynamics, but what if the answer to this mystery was never a power scaling inconsistency? What if all along it was something built into the very laws of the Soul Society itself? Fans had started questioning Isshin's unauthorized mission when he had gone to Naruki City without any official orders. He was investigating the Shinigami disappearances on his own initiative. This small detail had led many to wonder whether if different rules had applied to his deployment, or if he'd somehow bypassed the normal restrictions that we had seen when Hitsugaya Rangiku and the other Shinigami had come to the world of the living during the Arrancar arc. A few weeks ago, Kubo had offered his own thoughts on this long-standing mystery via his official fansite Club Outside. He had provided us with a single-word answer that had completely changed everything that we thought we had known about Isshin's fight against White. So before revealing what Kubo had shared with us, I need to first let you know that I've launched an all-new channel called Super Alpha EX. On that channel, I share my commentaries, reviews, and thoughts on everything related to games. So if you love the content that I make here and you want to see more, then definitely subscribe to my new channel, Super Alpha EX. Now, coming back to the video, when Kubo was asked directly whether if Isshin was suppressed by a Gente Rain during his fight with White, Kubo's response was unambiguous as he says, yes, that's correct. This simple confirmation destroys years of speculation, and it reveals the true nature of what we had witnessed within Naruki City. The Gente Rain system operates as an automatic spiritual pressure limiter that is placed on captains and lieutenants when they enter the world of the living. This isn't optional equipment or something that requires paperwork, it's an inherent function of passing through the Senkaimon that reduces the power of that captain or lieutenant to roughly 20% of their full capacity. Now, this system exists because the world of the living simply cannot withstand the full spiritual pressure of captain level beings without suffering catastrophic damage to both the environment and to the human souls that reside in that realm. What makes this reveal significant is that this limiter applies regardless of the Shinigami's authorization status. Isshin's unauthorized mission to Naruki City didn't exempt him from this restriction. The moment that he had stepped through the dimensional gateway, his power was automatically sealed. Even rogue missions are not exempt from this limiter, as it activates automatically through the Senkaimon. We witnessed this system in action during the Arrancar arc when Hitsugaya's team arrived in Karakura Town. Initially, Hitsugaya, Rangiku, and Renji had struggled against Grimmjow's Frachion, and these are opponents that shouldn't have posed a serious threat to their level of power. But just when the Shinigami appeared to be defeated, the tide turned dramatically once they had activated Gente Kaijo and removed their limiters. Suddenly, these same Arrancars were overwhelmed with ease, showcasing exactly how restrictive that 80% power reduction truly is. This system also highlights previously puzzling details about other characters. Ikkaku's unexpected difficulties against Edorad suddenly make sense if he was operating under similar restrictions despite not holding an official lieutenant position. The limiter appears to affect anyone with sufficient spiritual pressure rather than being strictly rank based, a logical safety measure given the human world's fragility. The automatic nature of this system means that even characters like Urahara and Yoruichi would theoretically be subject to those restrictions if they used official Soul Society pathways. However, given Urahara's technological abilities and his exile status, he likely developed alternative methods to bypass these limitations and leave the Soul Society for the world of the living. Now, understanding this completely reframes our perspective on spiritual pressure scaling throughout Bleach. When we see captains struggling in the human world, we're not witnessing their full capabilities, we are seeing heavily restricted versions of themselves operating at a fraction of their true strength. So this context does transform every human world encounter involving the Shinigami. Even think back to chapter 1 where Rukia had struggled with the hollow Fishbone D. This is because she was only at 20% of her full power when she was fighting against that hollow. This perfectly explains some of those inconsistencies with these new concepts that Kubo has introduced into the story. Now, with this Gentei Rain revelation in your mind, Isshin's battle against White transforms significantly. Isshin was actually showcasing a masterclass in tactical combat despite being under severe restrictions during his battle against White. Considering he was only operating at 20% of his true power, every aspect of his performance in that fight becomes remarkably impressive rather than disappointingly weak. The battle began with Isshin demonstrating strategic thinking that showcased his captain level experience. Rather than rushing into the fight, he deliberately released massive amounts of Reiatsu in order to lure out the mysterious threat that had been killing Shinigami. This calculated approach showed he understood he was dealing with an unknown entity and he had wanted to control the fight on his terms. The fact that he was able to easily draw out White directly to him validates his tactical instincts despite him being under pressure. Now, when White had finally appeared, Isshin's immediate recognition that this wasn't a typical hollow also highlights his exceptional battlefield analysis. Its black appearance and filled hollow hole marked it as something entirely different from standard threats. More importantly, Isshin quickly realized that despite White's hollow classification, its fighting style had resembled that of a Shinigami. This observation had guided its entire defensive strategy during this fight, as he realized that he was up against a hybrid creature that was combining hollow instincts with Shinigami combat techniques. When Isshin decided to activate his Shikai, this was a sound tactical judgment rather than one stemming from desperation. Isshin recognized that his sealed Zanpakuto was not sufficient against this unique threat and he responded appropriately. Even under severe limitations, the flames generated from Isshin's Zanpakuto Engetsu had given him the edge needed to shift the battle's momentum. Every action that Isshin had demonstrated during this fight had highlighted that he had a high level of combat intelligence, which comes with being a captain level Shinigami. The turning point of the fight had come with Isshin's devastating Blood Flame attack, a technique that perfectly highlights his exceptional capabilities even while being restricted. By incorporating his own blood into Engetsu's flames, he created a completely original combat technique powerful enough to sever White's arm entirely. Aizen's intervention during this fight becomes very interesting when you view it through the lens of Gentei Rain. The fact that Aizen felt compelled to personally interfere as he slashed Isshin from behind to prevent him from accessing Bankai, this demonstrates just how threatening Isshin remained despite operating on just 20% of his max capacity. Aizen explicitly stated that White would be a failure if defeated by a captain who is only using Shikai, yet his actions suggest that he wasn't confident that White could survive against even a restricted Isshin's Bankai. The injury that Aizen inflicted served two purposes. First, it prevented Isshin from accessing his Bankai while also creating some narrative justification for increased battle difficulty. But despite Isshin being wounded, he still continued pressuring White effectively. The experimental hollow had never truly gained the upper hand against Isshin, and it remained reactive to Isshin's attacks rather than dictating the flow of the fight. Perhaps most impressively, Isshin maintained tactical awareness throughout the encounter. He immediately recognized that his back wound came from a Zanpakuto rather than the claws of White, deducing the presence of a traitor within the Gotei 13. This level of battlefield analysis, while at the same time fighting a unique opponent, demonstrates the multi-layered thinking that defines these high-level Shinigami. Despite the conclusion of the fight, it doesn't diminish Isshin's performance. By that point, he had already demonstrated clear superiority over White despite fighting under massive handicaps. The experimental hollow was systematically being dismantled by a captain operating at a fraction of his true strength, and this is a testament to just how vast that true strength actually was. Appreciating that White had faced off against Isshin at 20% of his power reshapes our assessment of both of these combatants' actual capabilities, and it reveals some very interesting implications for Bleach's broader power hierarchy. So White actually emerges not as a captain level threat that some fans assume that it is, but as a mid-tier combatant whose power level was perceived entirely from Isshin's handicaps. As Aizen's prototype experiment, White represented the early stages of holification research. It was a functional prototype but unrefined. Compared to the perfected Arrancar that Aizen would create, White represented the very early stages of holification research. It was functional but unrefined compared to the perfected Arrancar that would soon join Aizen's Arrancar army. His construction from multiple Shinigami souls gave him unique properties, but this foundation didn't translate to any genuine captain level compatibility. Comparing White's performance to later threats like Grimmjow's Frachion, we get some very telling parallels. These Frachion initially pressed Hitsugaya's restricted team before being overwhelmed once the limiters were removed. White's similar performance patterns suggest that he operated at roughly the same tier, dangerous to limited captains, but ultimately outclassed by unrestricted ones. This places him somewhere in the lieutenant to low captain range, which perfectly aligns with the role as experimental proof of concept rather than a finished product. Isshin's noble heritage also becomes critical for understanding his exceptional performance under such severe limitations. The Shiba clan is among one of the 5 great noble families, and the noble bloodlines in Bleach consistently demonstrate higher spiritual pressure and compatibility, which is far beyond what their apparent ranks suggest. Characters like Byakuya and Yoruichi showcase how elite heritage translates to power levels that often dwarf their contemporaries. This noble advantage explains how Isshin could maintain tactical superiority and land some decisive blows against White while just operating at 20% capacity. If Isshin could systematically dominate White at limited power, his unrestricted capabilities become genuinely staggering. This reframing of Isshin's power level makes his later performances against the Arrancar version of the Grand Fisher and Aizen seem a lot more understandable. So we weren't witnessing Isshin undergo some power level increase over the 20 years since he had last used his Shinigami powers. This was actually Isshin displaying the full extent of his abilities during the Arrancar arc without any limiter. This reveal also affects how we evaluate other power scaling discussions throughout Bleach, as characters who seem to struggle in the human world encounters may have been far more capable than their apparent performances suggested. The automatic nature of the Gente Rain system means virtually every Soul Society Force deployment should be mathematically adjusted when assessing true character capabilities. Now, this of course is the case aside for the Fate Karakura Town arc, where I believe that all of the Shinigami had arrived within Fate Karakura Town without the Gente Rain system in effect. Isshin's Shiba clan heritage, combined with his captain level training and decades of experience, created a fighter whose restricted form could still overwhelm experimental hollows like White, and his true power without any restrictions most likely places him amongst the elite of the Gote 13. This is a tier reserved for legendary figures whose capabilities transcend normal ranking systems, so these are individuals like Kinpachi Zaraki. What's even more interesting is that we have yet to even witness Isshin's Bankai. If his Shikai could devastate White under 80% power reduction, his full unrestricted Bankai represents one of the series' most greatest remaining mysteries. The scope of power that Isshin possesses now with this new revelation does put him at a level that very few characters within Bleach could match. I do also have a separate video on the channel where I theorize what Isshin's Bankai could be, so definitely do check that one out after this one, but Kubo's confirmation completely changes our understanding of Isshin's place within the power hierarchy of Bleach. So from a captain who appeared to have struggled against the Hollow White, he now emerges as one of the most powerful captains within the history of the series. So yeah, we have now reached the point of the video where I want to hand over the discussion to all of you. What do you guys think about this new revelation from Kubo from his official fan club? Has this helped to change your thoughts about the power level of Isshin Kurosaki? Has it helped you to better understand why Isshin had lost against the Hollow White? If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention about Isshin's power level or the Gente Rain Gente Kaijo system, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. And lastly, thank you for making it to the end of the video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next BLEACH video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.